When I finally stepped outside, the sight that greeted me was nothing short of shocking. The leaves appeared to be ablaze. My mother had once again set fire to our home, marking the third time this has happened in just 3 years. In addition to this alarming pattern, my mother has also been involved in the deaths of her last 3 boyfriends during the same time frame. The reasons behind these tragic events remain unclear to me, but it is evident that the last 3 men she dated were somehow worse than those who came before them. In previous situations, we would simply flee when circumstances turned dire. However, the last 3 relationships resulted in her being hospitalized, which leads me to believe that she ultimately reached a breaking point with them. I often wonder why my mother continuously finds herself entangled with such abusive partners. She has repeatedly assured me that each new relationship would be the last, and for a moment, I genuinely believed her, especially after spending 3 months in this new town. Reflecting on my childhood, I realized that we never experienced this kind of luck before. The only decent man my mother ever had in her life was my father, who passed away when I was just 3 years old. Following his death, my mother bounced from one relationship to another, unable to cope with solitude, moving from town to town since my father's passing. As a result, I grew up without a solid father figure, and I often found solace in the times when it was just the 2 of us. During those moments, we would have movie marathons, and I felt comfortable sharing anything with her. After 3 months of stability, Billy entered our lives. Initially, he seemed kind, and my mother made significant changes to accommodate him. However, I hesitated to get close to him because I sensed that he might end up like the others. Unfortunately, my instincts proved correct. After 6 months of dating, the abuse began. Billy lost his job, turned to drinking, and took out his frustrations on my mother. Despite the turmoil, I allowed myself to feel comfortable again and even made some friends. All I wanted was to experience a normal teenage life, staying in one place for more than a year. As the bruises became more visible on my mother's body, I realized she likely had a plan to escape. But this time, I was determined not to let her run away again. I no longer wanted to live a life on the run. I longed for normalcy. I could no longer bear to hear the screams of the men or witness my mother being beaten repeatedly. In my mind, I concluded that she would be safer in prison than with an abuser. I had grown tired of running. I wanted to keep my friends and build a stable life. When the house started burning, I called the police and locked myself in the car to prevent my mother from stopping me. The only thing I remember is her frantic screams, repeating, "I can't believe," over and over again. I watched as she was handcuffed and placed in the back of the police car, and the echoes of her cries still haunt me. Just 14 years old, I found myself in foster care. Fortunately, I was able to stay in the same town and pursue a normal teenage existence. I've been here for a couple of years now, and the Bailey family adopted me. I make it a point to visit my mother once a week to keep her informed about my life and reassure her that I am doing well. Each time we meet, she expresses her sorrow, and I accept her apologies without hesitation. I shared with her the exciting news that I got accepted into Harvard and that I aspire to become a lawyer. She congratulated me, and then I left, feeling a mix of emotions. It's incredible to think that witnessing the leaves burn changed the course of my life for the better. I graduated from Harvard and eventually met my husband. We celebrated our wedding in the fall, a season that once brought me pain, but has now transformed into something beautiful. I believe this change occurred because I needed to rediscover the joy of fall, and what better way to do so than by celebrating my love during this season. Before all the chaos, I used to adore fall, but watching my mother destroy homes and hearing the terrifying sounds of violence tainted that love. Now, many years later, positive experiences have filled my autumns. I met Felix, my boyfriend, on Halloween night at a college party. He was dressed as Thor and bore a striking resemblance to the character, which compelled me to approach him while I was in my Black Widow costume. I told him that Thor was my favorite, and he introduced himself as Felix. From that moment on, it felt like fate had intervened. We ended up having a Halloween wedding, tying the knot on the anniversary of the day we first met. I never imagined that fall could bring me joy again. Yet here I am, marrying Felix. Despite the trauma I endured, I stood proudly in front of our loved ones, saying I do amidst the stunning backdrop of colorful fall leaves in a serene field. This time, there were no burning leaves or screams. Instead, I was surrounded by people joyfully tossing leaves into the air, congratulating us. Thanks to Felix, I have rekindled my love for fall. Additionally, my daughter has played a significant role in restoring my appreciation for the season. To my surprise, I gave birth to her on our wedding anniversary. Fiona weighed 7 pounds and 11 ounces, with black hair and blue eyes just like mine. I now have the perfect family, and in a way, I owe my mother gratitude for prompting me to call for help. If I hadn't taken that step, I might still be running alongside her. I know that reaching out for help was necessary for me to lead a normal life, and I am truly grateful for it. I find happiness in the fact that I can love fall again, and it took that one last traumatic experience to get me here. I will never again watch leaves burn, and I am completely fine with that. Felix and Fiona have helped me rediscover the beauty of fall, and the only time I see leaves on fire now is when my husband burns them in our backyard to clear them away. I enjoy watching the flames dance as he prepares to dispose of them, and I cherish the moments spent playing in the leaves with Fiona. It's hard to believe that she is now 1 year old, happily running through piles of leaves, and I couldn't be any happier. At times, when you find yourself sitting in complete stillness, immersed in an endless series of silent moments, you may begin to perceive the haunting echoes of the shattered remnants of individuals that people have left behind. This experience can be quite surprising, as these fragments often do not resemble what you would expect based on their original owners. It becomes clear that these remnants do not always align with their origins. From a young and delicate age, I came to understand this truth, particularly during the first and last encounter I had with one of these fragments by sheer accident. I quickly realized that it was far more beneficial to act as though these remnants were non-existent whenever possible, for their deep-seated sorrow could easily seep into your own being. After all, they are entities born from the ever-changing nature of human emotions and desires. Distinguishing them from actual living beings can be challenging, especially when they appear almost lifelike. However, this resemblance only occurs in instances where individuals have completely forsaken their former selves and transformed into something entirely different. The thought of what has happened to these lost souls made my heart quiver with unease. Had these individuals never come to the realization that they were no longer the person reflected back at them in the mirror? Would there come a day when they would wake up, gaze at their own reflection, and take stock of their chosen appearance, posture, and figure? Would they notice the hollowness in their eyes and ponder when that emptiness had taken hold? Did life still feel vibrant and alive to them? Could it be conceivable that something invaluable had been irrevocably lost? I found myself fervently hoping that I would never look into a mirror and discover that my amber eyes had vanished. If our eyes are indeed the windows to our souls, how much of our essence remains intact after we have relinquished pieces of our identity? How significant must the loss be for that void to transform into a mere recollection of reality? Might it be possible that, in contrast, they had discovered happiness? That what appeared to be a loss was actually the creation of space for something greater and more fulfilling? As I walked along the well-trodden sidewalk towards the bus stand, I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of my situation. It was a solitary oasis of light in an otherwise pitch-black night devoid of a moon. I had just emerged from a tense emergency meeting regarding a project that was spiraling out of control at the publishing company where I worked. The atmosphere felt so heavy and oppressive that even the stars seemed to have retreated behind. The thick blanket of dark clouds too intimidated to shine through. I was fairly certain I had missed the last bus by a couple of hours. However, I took solace in the fact that dawn would soon break, bringing with it the sun's warm embrace, which would paint the winter sky with vibrant hues, colors that symbolized a burning desire to persevere. to make another attempt, to encourage the world to awaken once more. This thought provided me with a small measure of comfort. It is often the constants in life, the things that will never lose their essence or ability to simply exist, that inspire us to do the same. There is a sense of reassurance found in the stability amidst the unpredictable waves of ever-changing circumstances. These reflections have been my companions throughout most of my 20s, a period during which I have largely navigated this journey alone. While it may have felt isolating at times, I believed it was the right path for me. Why should others who are not burdened by the same fate be compelled to carry the weight of my lost sorrow simply by being associated with me? As I continued on my way, I noticed another woman seated on the bench beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. The soft, watery orange hue cast an unsettling light over the deserted streets, creating an atmosphere filled with quiet anticipation, patience, and longing. What an intriguing combination they made. The woman remained perfectly still, as if she were part of the very stillness of the night itself. A wide-brimmed hat obscured her face, yet she seemed fixated on something far down the street, as if she were awaiting some kind of revelation. Was she waiting for someone? A vehicle? A dream? Perhaps even a specter? As I drew closer and settled onto the opposite end of the short bench, I sensed a deepening melancholy surrounding her presence. I dared not gaze directly at her, fearing that my curiosity might disrupt whatever enchantment or wish she was weaving into the fabric of this somber evening. After all, how does one make a wish upon a star that remains hidden from view? And strands of ivory hair cascaded down from beneath her hat, creating a striking contrast against the simplicity of her attire. Her delicate hands were clasped tightly into the fabric of her plain cotton skirt, which rested neatly in her lap. Although her back remained straight and unyielding, there was an undeniable air of gentle grace that surrounded her. It seemed as though she could remain in this spot indefinitely, if necessary. I found myself wondering how it was possible that she wasn't shivering in the cold. My own hands, rough and cracked from the biting chill, lay on the legs of my cream-colored pantsuit, appearing much older than my actual age suggested. With a slight shake of my head, I let out a deep sigh, attempting to push away the familiar demons that always lurked nearby at this hour of the night. Suddenly, I became aware of a distant sound, sobbing that echoed softly, like a sorrowful melody dulled by the passage of time and the complexities of life. It was her, the woman in the hat. The sound of her weeping drew me closer, like a siren's call that I knew I should resist. Yet, despite the depth of her sorrow, there was no quaking in her shoulders, no dampness staining her skirts, and no sign of weakness in her rigid stance. "Miss," I cleared my throat, trying to break the silence. "Are you all right? Would you like me to call someone for you? Is there someone you're waiting for?" I hesitated, hoping for any indication that she had heard my words, then gently tapped her shoulder, being as soft as I could manage. Once, twice. In response to that small gesture, her entire form collapsed inward. Her face fell into her hands, and she began to sob uncontrollably. In that instant, I was transported back in time to when I was just 10 years old, recalling a moment that felt eerily similar. At the tender age of 10, my chestnut ponytail bobbed energetically as I caught sight of myself in the bright summer light. I stood by the window of an ice cream shop, peering at a long line of people who were all yearning for something cold and sweet to alleviate the oppressive heat of the day. Frequently, I would make the journey home alone after playing soccer at the nearby park. Everyone in our neighborhood frequented the same spots, and the park was so close that my mother never felt anxious about my safety, as long as I made it back to the dinner table before dusk fell. There was something about the night that unsettled her. She avoided venturing outside once the sun had disappeared from the sky. As I reflected on this later, I couldn't help but wonder if her apprehension stemmed from a fear of the unknown. Perhaps because she sensed that there were things I could perceive that she could not. Maybe she was aware of these hidden truths, but chose to remain oblivious to them. If she truly understood, she would know that those things didn't emerge under the cover of darkness. They thrived in the light of day, which was the only thing capable of filling the void left behind by the parts of oneself that often feel absent. A smile crept across my face as I reveled in the innocent joy of childhood, with the sparkle of youthful longing reflecting in the sunlight that bounced off the shiny surfaces of large refrigerators and glimmered off the ice cream scooper that repeatedly plunged into the creamy vanilla. With great effort, I tore my gaze away from the delightful scene and noticed a woman standing a few feet behind me, observing me with a look of amusement. I racked my brain trying to remember where I might have seen her before. Was it at school? Could she be someone's mother? She bore a striking resemblance to a distant aunt I thought I had recognized from an old family album. As she chuckled softly, she knelt down to get a better look at my face beneath the brim of my baseball cap. "What's your name, dear?" she inquired, her voice warm and inviting. Her arms were sun-kissed and strong, adorned in a sundress, decorated with an array of vibrant spring flowers. Her silky black hair shimmered in the sunlight as it cascaded gracefully from her shoulder. "Odesa," I replied, my voice tinged with hesitation as I introduced myself. "Oh my, what an intriguing name you have. It carries a sense of destiny, as you can see." I shook my head in confusion, not fully grasping her meaning. It seems you are unaware of its historical significance, aren't you?" I shook my head once more, this time with more intensity, the youthful impatience evident in my demeanor. "It's somewhat tragic, really. You might find yourself feeling quite isolated as you grow older. Odesa translates to alone, but there's something unique about you that I can sense. You have the ability to perceive me quite clearly, don't you?" A wave of dread began to wash over me, accompanied by nervous perspiration on my palms. "That's correct, I am merely a fragment. I belong to your neighbor, a lovely lady, isn't she? Though lately she doesn't seem to be in high spirits, does she? Why are you speaking to me?" I managed to choke out the words. I had never engaged in conversation with one like her before. They had never appeared so tangible or real until now. Suddenly it struck me. I had never noticed her reflection in the window. There was the bright sunlight, the shoes passing by, the shopping bags being carried, and the sunglasses adorning faces, but there was no sign of that spring flower sundress. "Well, sweetheart, I've always had a fondness for you. It's unfortunate that your kind neighbor decided she no longer wanted me around. You see, I possess a special ability of my own. Occasionally, I can glimpse into the future." She smiled brightly at me, yet there was something unsettling about the way her teeth were perfectly aligned. That perfection felt oddly imperfect. "Your mother chose the name Odesa for you because it signifies being one of a kind. It represents the role of a timekeeper. That's what it means when you have the capability to see us," she chuckled charmingly, while brushing away a smudge of dirt from my flushed cheek. "You are destined to bear a heavy burden for a debt that was never truly yours to begin with. Unfortunately, I cannot reveal much more than that, but I am certain that you will gain a vivid understanding of what must transpire when the moment arrives," she stated. "Ebony. Fragments always seem to have ebony hair." I gazed at the woman sitting across from me on this bus bench, whose tears had transformed into quiet sniffles as she placed her hands back in her lap. She lifted her gaze towards me, tilting her head shyly, as if to silently inquire, "Would you genuinely assist me, miss?" "What is your name?" I whispered, deliberately overlooking what I already suspected. My heart raced, and the atmosphere around us felt increasingly suffocating. The glow of the streetlights began to fade, and finally, she met my gaze directly. But she didn't possess a face. There was simply no face at all. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, nothing at all. A smooth, flat expanse of skin lay before me, from which I could faintly hear the soft sounds of sniffles and quiet whimpering. It was as if this surface was a canvas upon which emotions were being painted, each sound a brushstroke of sorrow and vulnerability. The atmosphere felt suffocating. There was an absence of air, and the light around me seemed to be fading away to darkness. In that moment, I found myself paralyzed, unsure of how to respond or what actions to take in such a disorienting situation. This woman, she was more than just a person. She was a mere fragment of existence. This fragment had not yet fully formed into something complete. Instead of representing a past identity, she embodied the potential of what could eventually come to be. A wave of terror washed over me as I felt a delicate, pale hand inching toward my cheek. The skin of her hand was like ivory, untouched and unblemished, yet it seemed to yearn for something deeper. It was devoid of substance, filled only with an insatiable hunger. The irony of this surreal encounter struck me profoundly. I was caught in the grips of fear, aware that I was facing a debt that did not belong to me. I kept repeating to myself, "This is not my debt. I have done nothing wrong." As I watched, her hair transformed into a shadowy mass, the once pristine ivory of her skin fading away. The endless depths of obsidian darkness seemed to draw me in, threatening to engulf me completely. No, those sorrowful amber eyes held me captive. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I was unable to move, frozen in place by the intensity of the moment. Gradually, her face began to take form, becoming clearer and more defined. Our foreheads touched, creating an intimate connection between us. As she pulled me closer, I felt an inexplicable bond forming, as if we were two halves of a whole destined to intertwine in some profound way. She stood there, gazing at Earl and Marvis, contemplating how she would broach the subject of what she had just learned about the duo. She feared that Earl might label her a troublemaker and lash out physically. He had no qualms about hitting. A woman who spread rumors that could alter his life. And Marvis's life was another matter entirely. There was a time when a guy had confronted him, leading to a heated argument that escalated into a fistfight. That man had vanished after that dreadful day, a day that forever changed her perception of Earl. Now she kept a wary eye on him whenever he was nearby, as her trust in him had significantly diminished. Earl could be incredibly charming, but there were moments when it was clear not to provoke him. He would graciously hold doors open for women, offer brief smiles, and nod politely at other men. He showed respect to elders and tended to trust people until they took advantage of him more than once. Yet on other days, he transformed into a threat to anyone who dared to challenge him, resorting to foul language instead of the courteous words others preferred. Earl was a loyal friend to those who treated him kindly. Finally, she resolved to confront Earl directly and share the alarming news she had overheard. It was information that could alter the course of his life forever, which felt like an eternity in her eyes. Someone needed to warn him before he entered the city and found himself trapped in a dark room, subjected to intense questioning that could lead to a lifetime of punishment under the eternal sun. She had heard that once someone faced that punishment, there was no escape. The eternal sun would incinerate them, leaving nothing behind of her town. 2 centuries ago, Imperial soldiers discovered Ziyabe, a planet once bustling with towns and vibrant communities. The inhabitants were living their lives to the fullest until tragedy struck, when soldiers unleashed devastating acid bombs on their homes, leading to widespread chaos. In a desperate bid for survival, many fled into caves and tunnels to escape the relentless bombings. Now Ziyabe is a desolate world, inhabited by only a few survivors. Among them was a girl who had been abandoned by her parents, who found raising her too burdensome. They craved a life of luxury and social status instead. Her hometown, Streamsville, was located on a different planet, where newcomers were kept at bay until the government deemed them safe after thorough investigations. "Earl, please promise me you won't shoot the messenger," she began, knowing her next words would likely ignite his fury. "I have some news that I know will upset you, and I really hope your anger doesn't spiral out of control." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in before continuing. "The police are searching for you. They've accused you of murder this afternoon. From what I've heard, you were in a conversation with someone, and your temper flared uncontrollably, resulting in their death. The police confronted me, insisting I reveal your whereabouts. I told them I hadn't seen you in 3 days. I'm truly sorry, Earl, that I had to be the one to break this to you." Earl stood still for a moment, processing the information before responding. "I was with Marvis all afternoon." He glanced at Marvis, who was ready to affirm his alibi to the authorities. The two women exchanged glances, and then Marvis spoke. "But it wouldn't make a difference, would it? They'll just claim I'm covering for you." Unsure of their next move, they formed a circle, hoping someone would come up with a clever solution to escape this predicament. Each of them wished for a brilliant idea that could save Earl from facing the death chambers. Marvis found herself regretting that they hadn't reached town before encountering her. It was her responsibility to lead Earl into the town, so the soldiers could apprehend him. Bringing Earl down would require several men, as he was accustomed to fighting multiple opponents at once. How could she lure him into town without him catching on to her true intentions? And how would she explain this situation to her superior? She had specific orders, and she felt like she was failing spectacularly. The outcome didn't look good for her. If only she could devise a plan to get Earl into town. However, her mind was completely blank. Instead of punishing Earl, her boss would likely make an example out of her. "Earl, let's approach the town and see what's happening. If the soldiers spot you, we both know you can easily outrun them. I'm at a loss here, but if we get closer, we can ensure they're on the lookout for you." Earl paused for a moment before responding. "I refuse to go anywhere near town. The soldiers will have to come find me. I won't run for my life when I haven't done anything wrong. Why do you want me to head into town?" Both of them stood there, gazing at Marvis, questioning whether she had betrayed them to the soldiers. She appeared to be getting quite chummy with them. She had waved at them when she thought no one was watching, and they both had heard rumors that she was involved with one of the soldiers. Earl grabbed her by her bare arms, holding her firmly, and demanded, "Answer me!" Tears streamed down her face as she finally confessed, "Yes, I did. They told me they were going to imprison you for a couple of years. They never mentioned anything about killing you." In a sudden burst of defiance, she stomped on his foot, causing him to loosen his grip, and then she bolted towards the town to alert the soldiers to search the woods. As I finally stepped out into the world beyond my front door, I was struck by a vivid sight. The leaves were ablaze with color, almost as if they were literally on fire. "Dad!" I shouted, my voice rising above the rustling of the wind. "The autumn leaves from the apple trees are burning." Yet there was no response from him. It seemed that the responsibility to act had fallen squarely on my shoulders. I dashed toward the usual spot where the garden hose would be found, coiled up neatly like a serpent ready to spring into action. However, to my surprise, the hose was nowhere to be seen. This was odd, very odd in fact. I spent an entire hour circling the house searching for that elusive hose, until I finally arrived at the front of the house. There, standing still and seemingly transfixed by the sight of the crisp leaves being consumed by the relentless sun, was my father. His black hair, which looked ragged at the ends, danced lightly in the breeze. "What are you doing, Dad?" I questioned, my frustration bubbling over. "Where's the hose?" "Aislinn Celeste Charlize," he replied, his tone laced with irritation. "What do you think I am doing? And why do you need a hose? You're just standing there watching our family fortune go up in flames. You're not taking any action. If we had sold all those apples, we could have been well off. Why, of all days, did you choose to stand idly by? Why aren't you doing something?" My voice escalated into a yell, fueled by anger and desperation. "Where's your mother?" he asked cautiously, as if trying to divert the conversation. "She's in bed sick, remember? The wife you seem to have forgotten about," I shot back, my words sharp and biting. "Forgotten about? What has gotten into you lately, Aislinn?" he pressed, clearly bewildered by my outburst. "What's gotten into me? It's the fear of losing my mother while you do absolutely nothing. You're destroying our family's future right before my eyes. That's what's wrong," I retorted, feeling the weight of my emotions. "How am I ruining our family fortune? I am not the son or the one to blame for this, Aislinn. he exclaimed, his voice rising in defense. "Stop saying my name!" I screamed in frustration. "That's it, I'm leaving and I won't be coming back. I expect you to clean up this mess yourself since you've done nothing to help us all this time." As I turned to walk away, I heard my father clear his throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Has done nothing, Iceland, come back," he called after me, but I chose to ignore him. I continued walking, determined not to look back. While I couldn't alter the painful reality of my mother's battle with cancer, I could at least take a stand against my father's inaction and refusal to step up as a parent. I drove a short distance from my home, navigating through a couple of streets until I found a suitable spot to park my car along the roadside. As I sat there, I could feel the cold wind brushing against my skin, and I noticed how droplets of water began to form on my cheeks, sliding off like they were racing down a frozen slope. The sound of my own sobs reverberated in the stillness of the street, creating an echo that seemed to amplify my despair. How could he do this to me? Just stand by and watch without lifting a finger. With Halloween just around the corner, what could he possibly be planning? A funeral, perhaps? Funerals during this time of year. What could he want from that, and so? Award for his cruelty? I highly doubt it. As I turned to look behind me, I saw a long fence stretching alongside the road, bordered by vast fields of golden hay and wheat swaying gently in the breeze. Adorning the fence were freshly painted pumpkins, each one sporting spooky faces that added a touch of eeriness to the scene. It brought back memories of when my older sister Celeste was still at home before she left for college. We used to celebrate Halloween together by painting our pumpkins while the twins bounced around us, their faces lit up with joy and excitement. It was a much more innocent and child-friendly activity compared to the traditional carving of pumpkins. We would proudly display our colorful creations on the steps of our porch, complemented by a candle-lit lamp that illuminated our family's artistic efforts. And as an added bonus, since we left the pumpkins intact, we could later transform them into delicious seasonal soups and other dishes. Those meals were delightful, and I can still recall the flavors vividly. But that feels like a lifetime ago now. I haven't seen Celeste in ages. She is 23 years old now, and if you're curious, she happens to be my absolute favorite person in the world. The pumpkin nearest to me seemed to gaze directly into my eyes, as if it were watching my every move. A shiver ran down my spine as I observed the pumpkin shift slightly. How could it possibly move? I blinked twice and rubbed my eyes in disbelief. Suddenly I felt an unsettling sensation as I imagined spiders crawling toward me on the ground. Although I couldn't see them, I knew they were there, thousands of them scuttling in my direction, and they were hungry. Overcome with terror, I opened my eyes wide, only to find myself face to face with a man wearing a pumpkin for a head. His face was devoid of eyes, and I recalled my mother's words, "If you have no eyes, you have no soul." Slowly, I began to crawl away as he staggered closer to me, dragging me toward him by my feet. Instead of screaming, he somehow managed to express his horror in silence, his entire body screaming in a way that was almost surreal. His eyes were wide with terror, his mouth rigidly open in a silent scream, and his chalky complexion appeared gaunt and lifeless. His fists were clenched tightly, knuckles pale and white, with his nails digging painfully into the palms of his hands. "That's adorable, but sir, you seem to believe that you are intimidating. However, I must say, I've encountered true terror before, and you certainly don't possess the same chilling smile that he did," I remarked with a smirk as I attempted to rise slowly from my position, only to quickly come to the realization of how hopeless my efforts were when I had to bite down on my lip to stifle a cry of pain. A sharp and searing pain shot through my head, accompanied by a kaleidoscope of vibrant spots dancing in my vision. It felt as though every part of my body had endured a brutal beating, and each slight movement sent waves of discomfort coursing through my muscles and bones. Despite this agony, I was determined to escape this place, to distance myself from this menacing figure. As I winced from the relentless throbbing pain, I began to grasp at the fissures in the pavement, using them as leverage to pull myself away. I made a conscious effort to avoid looking directly at the man, focusing instead on pushing myself further from him, while being extra cautious not to let my hands touch the shards of glass littered around me. Yet, there came a fleeting moment, a single instant, when I couldn't resist glancing back, only to be met with the sight of someone I recognized lying lifelessly. This reckless decision spurred me to crawl forward once more, and then, crack, my hand landed on a jagged piece of glass, causing me to hiss sharply in pain as the man's head snapped around to face me. I am not afraid of graveyards, nor do I fear the monsters that roam during Halloween or the terrors that invade my dreams. Yet, despite my bravado, this situation managed to instill fear within me. With a knife clutched in one hand, he ignited the spark of dread that simmered in my stomach, intensifying it with his cold, dark gaze. All I ever sought was to give love and request assistance when needed. As he plunged the knife into my throbbing heart, he uttered a single word,